Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altspeed Technologies, the show that puts you, the listener, in the driver's seat because you are the content. The phone lines are open to be a part of the program. It's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Hey, give me a call. We'll have a conversation about your tech questions or business and tech questions. Linux advocate, above all else, small business owner, and now host of the only show centered around you, the listener. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. My name is Noah Chalaya. So good evening to you all. Welcome to the Ask Noah Show. Happy to be here on the air with you tonight. Most of you know that I am pretty biased when it comes to operating systems. I'll be the first to admit that I don't think that Linux is just a tool. I don't think it's just a tool for a job. I don't think that Windows is just a tool for a job. And I don't think macOS is just a tool for a job, because unlike Microsoft and Apple, Linux is not some faceless corporation. They're not some faceless corporation that is motivated by a bigger bank account. And by the way, I am not saying that there is anything wrong with wanting a bigger bank account. Believe you me, Altspeed Technologies is very much driven by a big bank account. That's how we function. But Linux is about more than that. Linux is about the community. It's about interpersonal relationships. It's the elementary OS guys helping out the Solus guys design a better desktop. The rounded corners. It's the VisuX guys working with the Ubuntu Mate guys to design the perfect graphic set. It's the Martin Wimperses of the world designing a Linux distribution for your average user and then getting picked up by companies like Canonical because they want to take his good ideas, they want to take his passion, and they want to incorporate it into Linux for everyone. They want to thank him for his hard work. And yes, I am biased. For the record, I am not talking about a religion here. I am talking about a healthy due respect that is owed for the people that have put their blood, sweat, tears, and sacrifice into a software stack to give it to you, the user, for a better experience. And I was listening to, I think it was today or yesterday, I was listening to a radio show on my way into work, and the host was talking about his uncle who worked for a company called Alcoa Aluminum for like 50 years. And when his uncle retired, they were all sitting around for a gathering, family gathering, and one of the relatives brought a dish, and after the meal had wrapped up, this relative went over to the dish that he or she had brought and pulled out a box of Reynolds wrap. And the uncle immediately got very upset, got out of his chair, walked over, grabbed that box of Reynolds wrap, threw it in the garbage and said, Alcoa Aluminum fed this family for 50 years. Alcoa provided for us, and in this house, we use Alcoa products. And I thought about that all the way into my way to work, and it really stuck with me throughout most of the day, and as I was preparing for the show, kind of wanted to make a point to talk about it, because you don't find that kind of loyalty in 2017. A lot of people, they just work a job. That's all they care about. And so for me, as I apply that to my life, if sticking up for free and open source software, if sticking with the free and open source alternative, even if we're not perfect, even if we have some areas for improvement, even if we don't have all the monies to do all the new and shiny things that the big boys do, if showing loyalty to those communities, if showing loyalty to the people that gave me that product, that worked so hard to give me an operating system that doesn't crash, that I don't need to reinstall every 6 months, if showing some loyalty and making a couple sacrifices to support a community of people that gave me a world-class operating system with updates and usable software when I was working at a help desk for $5.25 an hour and putting $10 of gas in my tank at a time because they didn't have enough money to fill my tank. And I also, I had the choice back then. I could fill my gas tank, or I could put $10 of gas in my car, which would get me to school and back, and I could pick up my girlfriend, now wife at the time, and I could take her to McDonald's for a date because that's what I could afford on $5.25 an hour. And I had a usable operating system. And I thought about this because today, back then, writing a check for $20 was, I'd break out in a cold sweat to spend $20 on anything, just let alone software. I mean, geez, it's like, how do I get this done? And now I can write a check for, $2,000 pretty easily and not really think about it. And I'm going to show support and respect to those people that allowed me to get to where I am. I haven't forgotten that. And when I think about that, I am comparing and contrasting this to companies like Microsoft and Adobe who would have liked to see me thrown in jail for software piracy because I stole their software. As a 16-year-old kid making $5 an hour. It's ridiculous. And if that makes me a religious zealot, so be it. Then I am the poster child for Linux zealotry, and I am proud to wear that badge of honor. Now, last couple weeks, we have been talking about virtualization technology, and the ways that you can manage this stuff, and all the cool things you can do under Linux. And the more I dig into it, the more I find. And recently, oVirt has come across my radar. And if you're not familiar with oVirt, what oVirt is basically an infrastructure developed by RedHat, the community portion of RedHat. And it allows you to manage clusters of servers. Now, I don't know much, to be honest with you, about managing clusters of open virtualization technology, but I know somebody that does. So joining us on the program, we are welcoming Brandon Johnson from RedHat. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Good. Hi, how are you, Noah?
Excellent.
On the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, thanks so much for being here today. Okay, I got to ask you a question. You guys are kicking harder than a Sensei over at RedHat these days, and I've been following it right and left, all the things that are going on. But I just got to ask this right off the bat. Is there some sort of company policy or company hat that all of you guys take your employee pictures wearing a red hat?
No.
That's just something that you just all kind of went and bought the same red hat and took a picture, because all you guys that I've been talking to over the last week that work for RedHat, all your profile pictures are of like this identical hat. And I wasn't sure if you guys like all go shopping together, if it's like an official thing.
No, actually, so we get when we first started RedHat. So on day one, so we're issued our laptop and our everything else that we need to do our job. But also we are issued a red hat. We're issued a red fedora as well. So that is something we take home that we can take home with us.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been part of our culture it's been part of our onboarding process for a very long time, as far as I know. I've been with RedHat for about 5 years.
Okay, well, great. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And, the more I learn about your internal, culture, Brandon, the more impressed I am. And like I said, you guys are doing amazing things. And, we could talk for hours about what I think of RedHat as a company and all the things that you're doing. But I know that you specifically wanted to talk about oVirt. And that's something that I don't know a whole heck of a lot about. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are listening right now that don't know a lot about it as well. So tell me about oVirt.
Yeah, so, you've been talking a lot about virtualization on your show, and it's something I just wanted to bring up because it's, I think it's one of the best ways to manage KVM. So KVM, KVM libvirt. So oVirt is, it's designed originally to compete with VMware. So, and really be able to easily manage Linux virtualization hosts, and be able to interact with them through like a Spice console. If you're not familiar with Spice, like VNC, you can also use VNC to interact with it as well. And I've been working with it for, it's been a project now for a little over 6 years, if my memory's correct on that. And it's an easy button, essentially, of getting large KVM clusters set up. So it sets up the live migration aspects. It sets up your storage for you. It's really, really easy to manage. And to set it up, like you first, like in case of oVirt, or if I'm going to plug a product really quick. So oVirt, it's the upstream project, and the downstream is RedHat virtualization. Mm-hmm. And but if we're talking upstream, which I'm going to going forward, is you install CentOS, and enable the repo for oVirt. And then you can install it through just an RPM, and then there's a script that'll set up the manager bit for you. Or you can install Cockpit, and Cockpit has all the smarts underneath and you have to install the oVirt plugin for Cockpit, and it would have all the smarts underneath to set it up for you.
Now, oVirt is. I was playing. You have to forgive me because I've just been playing it for the last day or two. But the basically, it's all administrated from web console, right?
That's right. Everything's administered from the web console. So you can also interact it with the VMs through other utilities like Virt Manager or Virsh for the command line. But the primary way to interact with the virtual machines and storage and the virtual hosts, is through the web console.
So how long do you think it would take somebody starting from scratch that's maybe never had some experience with virtualization infrastructure before? How long do you think it would take them from a blank box to running a virtualization host and be ready to start deploying VMs?
Yeah, with all the tooling that we've put out, I'd say about 5 to 10 minutes to get the manager set up. Really, it's the time to install CentOS. That's really what it is. Everything is really pre-configured. It's really fast to get set up. Sometimes you need to make sure. The thing is with oVirt is like it's very picky about networks and all that. You need to make sure all your networks are set up correctly. But if all that's all set up correctly, it doesn't take very long to set up oVirt.
Now, when you were talking to me about some of the advantages of deploying something like oVirt, as opposed to, why would I not just deploy a standalone KVM instance?
Well, partly standalone KVM. I think it's a pain, it's a pain anyway to configure things like live migration. So live migration, for people that don't know what it is, basically allows a virtual guest to move seamlessly from one host to the next. oVirt does all that for you. You don't have to configure that. That's like one of the things that, if that's even misconfigured incorrectly, you're going to run into problems. And oVirt handles that for you.
I know one of the things when I was setting up live migrations was I would want to set it up from one virtual host to the other, but one of the major pain points, if you've never done a live migration before, not you, but if there's somebody out there that hasn't done it before, you have to have shared storage. So you're basically forced to set up an NFS server and then mount those NFS shares on both of your virtual hosts, and then you can facilitate a live migration. Does oVirt handle that for you?
Exactly. Yeah, it handles all that for you. And there's also the ability. So oVirt not only I'm going to take a quick step back. So oVirt not only manages virtualization, it also manages Gluster. For those who aren't familiar with Gluster, Gluster is a clustered file system. And what that gives you and Cockpit can help you set this up as well. oVirt is basically now the first hyper-converged virtualization, fully open source hyper-converged solution. So basically, you can take a couple, like 3 hosts, fill them full of disks, and the installer will set up both KVM and oVirt and Gluster, and it'll set up all the storage underneath. So you don't need to have that SAN or that NFS share. You can just pool the local storage, and that's what oVirt can use.
That's fantastic. What kind of scale is brought to mind when Red Hat was developing this project? How many servers, how many clusters of servers are you envisioning that this would hold?
So oVirt itself, like not in the hyper-converged sense, but it was designed for massive scale, like thousands of hosts, hundreds of clusters, multiple storage backends, tens of thousands of VMs. Like it was built for enterprise scale.
Wow, that's incredible. And I assume it's running libvirt underneath, right? Underneath the hood.
Yeah, absolutely. It's using libvirt and also another protocol called VDSM. Let's see if I remember. Virtual Desktop Server Manager.
Okay.
That's the correct. Too many acronyms.
Yeah, right. No kidding, right? One of the things that I always look for when I'm going to go try out a new piece of technology is a really great go-to like quick start guide or getting started. What are the packages that people need? Or is there a particular guide that you recommend that people look at and say, here's how you can just kind of bang this out real quick, or these are the packages that you have to install and then it will just work?
Yeah, so there's oVirt.org/download. That's a great guide. And also on RedHat's website and our documentation. So a lot of people don't know this, but our documentation is public. It's free and public.
Mm-hmm.
So docs.redhat.com, go to Red Hat Virtualization. There's actually a bunch of quick start guides in there as well. And a lot of it translates between the upstream project and the actual product.
Yeah, I reference all Red Hat documentation a lot for various things. In fact, one of the things I've always really appreciated is in the community section of the Red Hat site. A lot of times you can ask a question, and there's somebody from Red Hat or from that project will come and respond. And so I had a question the other day about a multi-headed. If I wanted to run a multi-headed VM, and how can I install a second display on that VM and then use RDP to access those dual displays? And I found the answer, actually, interestingly enough, in the community forums. I think that's a great resource, as well as, obviously, like you said, the Red Hat documentation. I wanted to pass on a question from KSO512 in the chat room. He asks, what are the compelling advantages of oVirt over VMware or OpenStack?
Well, OpenStack, I don't even like comparing OpenStack to oVirt.
Too complicated?
OpenStack, it's not that it's necessarily too complicated. There's a lot of components to it.
Mm-hmm.
We do sell an OpenStack product, but it's something that it really depends on the use case.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't like getting into that. But in case of VMware, it's mostly, I actually think that for Linux workloads, which is, my specialty, I've been working with Linux for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And Linux workloads run better on KVM. Than VMware. I've worked with both products, in my previous life. I think VMware makes a great product. They really do. But just purely from a speed perspective, I think KVM is faster.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, just as an aside, that was one of the things that impressed me very early on with Red Hat was everyone was kind of centering around Zen, and all of a sudden KVM came out, and there's like this. You start looking at it, it's like, well, the performance difference is just amazing, but we have all of this infrastructure lined up behind Zen, and there's all this marketing behind Zen, and you guys you're right on top of it. You're like, you know what, KVM's better. We're going to support it. And all of a sudden now the vast majority of installations that I've come across, at least on Red Hat, are KVM.
Almost every major, except for Amazon and
mm-hmm.
obviously Azure, the back-end hypervisor is probably going to be KVM.
Sure.
DigitalOcean, for example, uses KVM. I think it's one of the it even handles Windows workloads fairly well.
Yeah.
If you have all the correct drivers installed, if you're using the VirtIO drivers, the Windows workloads run very well on KVM.
Let me ask you this. Naylor in the chat room is asking about linked clones. So, for example, can you set up a single machine and then spawn a bunch of clones off of that original machine? Then you update the first one, and all the clones will get that update or that installed package.
Yeah, I actually get this question quite a lot. So the way it gets handled in oVirt is it's handled at the template level, so you can link it off a template.
Okay.
And you can just create a new version of that template to update those clones.
Okay, so the functionality is there. You just you approach it a slightly different way.
Yeah. We approach it differently. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Is there anything else that I mean, I know it's hard to take, 6 years worth of work and try and condense it down into even a 1 hour radio program, much less in a section of a radio program. But is there anything else that, the highlights, the heavy hitting points of oVirt?
Well, like when we originally, it's RedHat. RedHat doesn't do, we don't do a lot with desktops, but one thing that we do pretty well is we in the product we call it virtual technical workstation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very good at handling those workstation, virtual developer desktops, essentially. That niche of VDI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do a really good job there. And also, even though it's out of it, might get yelled at for saying this, but I actually think that with the more recent versions of oVirt, we're doing a lot better in the we could do a lot better in the VDI space.
Sure.
It actually works pretty well. If you want to do those types of massive update, massive VDI systems, it runs fairly well. I mean, it's not as good as some of our proprietary counterparts for VDI yet, but it does the job, especially for task those like a front office desktop. It would do that just fine. But for for more power users, there's definitely limitations. But from a virtual, the technical workstation side, being able to pass through NVIDIA cards.
Yes. Oh, let's talk about that for a second. GPU pass-through. So first I'll ask, how well does that work? And then my second follow-up question is, how difficult is that to get it working? Does it require special hardware to, I know that certain types of KVM pass-through require certain models of motherboards, stuff like that?
I don't know those models off the top of my head, but but it requires very specific NVIDIA cards. Usually, this K, I think it's the K. I have to look them up. I'll send them to you so you can put them in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But it's not. But it's not. It's actually not that hard. Passing a device through is not that hard at all. It's really a click of a button inside of oVirt. And then we'll see what happens, but I'm hoping to see VMware has a feature called vGPU, and that basically it just allocates scheduling to the video card rather than dedicating the video card to a virtual machine. And I'm hoping to see that functionality. That functionality is actually available today in libvirt, but I'm hoping to see that functionality exposed in oVirt pretty soon.
I have played with a number of projects that are built on top of libvirt, and I have run into that same issue time and time again, where I know that the underlying hypervisor supports it, and yet they just then make a button for it. And it's funny, that for the longest time, that has what has kept me on just plain old libvirt, and I just manage it with Virt Manager because I can always drop to a Virt shell. And if there is something that for a long time, snapshots didn't exist in Virt Manager. You couldn't do live snapshots in Virt Manager. It's a thing now.
Exactly.
But that feature was there for 3 years before.
Yeah, there's actually workarounds. There's actually workarounds for things like that in oVirt. They're called host hooks. Mm-hmm. So you write, you put it in a script, and it'll actually go call the appropriate commands to do things. So that's something we used to do in oVirt 3, the current version of oVirt's 4.1.4. But in the oVirt 3 or Rev 3, a lot of the time we had to do what we call host hooks, and you can still, that functionality is still exposed, but you can still do that. That's how we used to do PCI pass-through. We don't do it that way anymore. We do it through the UI.
Another question.
A lot easier, a lot more intuitive.
Absolutely. Another question that just came up in the chat room is they're wondering if you could expand more on when you say certain types of NVIDIA cards. You mean Quadros? Is that what you're getting at?
I'd have to look them up, but they're NVIDIA's server grade cards.
Gotcha. So it's
I'm sure others. Those are the ones I know we've tested, but I'm sure others work. It's just a matter of I just know which ones we've tested.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you have a white list of, we know that these are the working ones, but technically it's PCI pass through, so nothing stopping you from giving it a go and see if you can get some consumer grade $80 graphics card to pass through. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Yes No Show. People have more questions. Where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at @BrandonJohnson, and of course on Telegram. I'm in the chat room. And also, I know at the start of the show, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, a lot of people at Red Hat, that's the way we are. I mean, there's actually a few of us that are very militant. We will not use anything but Linux.
Yeah, boy, tell me. Yeah, oh, geez. Okay, I was gonna let you go, but now I can't. Now you got me on a rant. I toured Red Hat a couple of years ago, and when we go into various companies, and I've been to a lot of big companies, you walk around and as a Linux advocate, I kind of keep my eye out. How many of these people are actually using Linux? And you'd be surprised how many quote unquote Linux companies are stacked up behind a bunch of iMacs and behind a bunch of MacBook Pros. And I'm sure there's an Apple computer somewhere in the Red Hat building, but we didn't see it. Everyone there was running a Red Hat. I was surprised at the amount of people that are running Red Hat as a desktop operating system. I was truly shocked. And I guess when you work for the company, nobody laughs at you when you're like, yeah, I want to watch this DVD on VLC. How do I get VLC installed on Red Hat? But me as an outsider, if I go on, a generic IT forum and say, how do I install VLC on Red Hat? There's going to be 15 people lining up to tell me how Red Hat is a server operating system and I should not be using that. I should be using Ubuntu or something, right? But no, you guys literally eat your own dog food. I got to ask, what's your personal desktop distro? Like, what's your favorite?
So right now I'm running Fedora 26.
Okay.
On my main workstation. I have an XPS also, XPS 15, running Fedora 26 as well. But my work-issued laptop is a Lenovo X1, and I'm currently running RHEL 7.4, and I'm running on there just because the packages get updated more frequently, and I like to have my desktop system up to date. I'm actually running Mate out of Apple. So the Apple packages get for Mate get regularly updated, actually. So it's RHEL 7.4 currently. I think it's GNOME 3.22. Mm-hmm. But I think the Apple packages right now are 1.16. It's not completely up to date, but it's up to date enough for me.
Yep. And you are one of those people then that if I sat down to Red Hat or running Red Hat on your laptop, how do you find that to be like a daily driving desktop operating system?
Oh, I've been running Red Hat since 1998.
Oh wow! So, that was before. That's before the split, isn't it?
Yeah, it was before the split. I think it was RHEL
5.6,
RHEL 5.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say 5.
One of those.
Yeah, 5.4 was the first version of Red Hat, and then it was one or two versions after that the split happened. That must have been 2004 or 2003, somewhere in there.
Yeah, the split was 2003.
Okay. Yep.
And it was Red Hat 9. That was the last Red Hat Linux.
Yep.
And, then it was Fedora. Yep. And then RHEL 2. something. RHEL 2. something. I've been running it for a very long time. Except for when I worked at Novell, I used SUSE.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I've been running Red Hat forever. I think it's rock solid. There was a little dark period in my career where I was running a MacBook Pro.
Get off! No, I'm just kidding.
But it's just it's just what you but my desktop, my main workstation has always been a Red Hat desktop. And I love it. I think it works great for my workflows.
Yeah, I think so. And, I'm actually quite proud of the fact that I have run every single version of Fedora since version one. And in fact, I won't say where it is, but I went back to one of my very first clients, before I even started Altispeed. It was back when I worked for a medical software company, and they approached me on the side and said, would you do some contracting work for us? And it was when Fedora Core 4 had come out, and we had set up a server on Fedora Core 4 because it's what I knew at the time. And I went back there just a week or two ago. That stupid box is still in production. I'm like, you guys aren't really still using that, are you? Oh yeah, we are. We use it all the time. I'm like, do you guys have any idea what a terrible idea it is to be using that thing? Like, I will come fix it for you for free and get that thing on a more suitable operating. No, you will not touch that thing. That has been one of the most solid boxes we've ever had in this building. I'm like, yeah, I can make it just as solid, just without this gaping honeypot sitting on your network. It's just a really bad idea. But I've been a huge fan of Red Hat, and the more I talk to you guys, the more I communicate with Red Hatters, as you guys call each other. The more I impressed I am with you guys. And, I know you're a big supporter of the Ask Noah show, and we definitely appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about oVirt. And I'm going to be playing with it, and I'll report back.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come on. Everyone here talks about containers and all the new shiny, and I wanted to, you guys you've been talking about virtualization. I just wanted to make sure that everyone out there knew the options to run oVirt.
Yeah.
Run KVM.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like I said, I've talked about KVM and Virt Manager. I'm sure you've heard all of that, and so to be able to talk about actual cluster management and stuff like that, and I've done even some small clustering in Virt Manager, but it's just not quite the same thing of what you're talking about. So thank you so much, Brandon. I really appreciate you coming on. Mike is calling from Alabama. Actually, Mike, we'll put you on. Mike, welcome to the Ask Noah show.
Hey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How can I help?
Well, yes, sir. I'm just, for one, I'm a big fan of the show. Thank you for all you do for the Linux and open source community as a whole.
Thank you for your support.
My question, yes, sir. My question is, I'm a big fan of Linux, obviously. I've used it for years now on my desktop, laptop, and my cell phone. Mm-hmm. But the only real option has been Android. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of bugged me because it's so over-Googleized. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Googs are getting you. So I was wondering, I'm really interested in Tizen, and just me, maybe, I would love to even run desktop Fedora on there if I could. Mm-hmm. But what is a possible alternative for Android that I could run on? I have an HTC M9.
I almost left your call on hold simply because the rest of the show, I'm actually going to talk all about Android and alternatives, and I've been playing with them, and my answer will take the rest of the show is what I'm basically trying to tell you. But the short answer to your question is F-Droid or Lineage OS, and I don't want to give the rest of the segment away, so I'm going to save part of it, but there is an application I'm going to talk about in just a couple of minutes that will make your battery life go from a day and a half to 3 days. And basically what it does is it allows you to go down, it's like an app, and you click the program that you want, and it goes out to what would be Google Play Services, downloads the APK locally onto your phone, and then installs it. So you have all of the advantages of the Android ecosystem without any of the Google stuff on top of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I just gave away the rest of my show to answer your question. But no, the thing is, I have phones lined up the wazoo, spread across here. I, for the first time, have been carrying around an Apple device with me just so that I could do this episode of the show. That tells you my dedication. I know that tells you my dedication. But yes, I'm going to have a way better answer for you coming up in just a couple of minutes. So if you want to hang on, I'll expand on that. But that's the short answer to your question is Lineage OS is what I'm running right now. But F-Droid is also great, and then this application that I'm going to talk about that I don't want to give away. Does that answer your question partially? Anyway,
very much so. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much for your call. I really appreciate it. Jordan is calling. We don't know where Jordan is. Hi, Jordan. Welcome to the Ask Noah show.
Hey there, Noah.
Hi, how can we help?
Hey, so over the weekend I've been messing with RAID on MDADM.
Okay.
And I've been trying to figure out how to install my root file system onto a RAID 0 array. And every time I try to install it, I've been using Ubuntu Mate to do it.
Okay.
And I'll boot into a live CD, and I'll set up the RAID device so it's MD0. And when I go to install grub install fails. And I'm not sure where I should put that, so I don't know if that's where I'm going wrong.
What? Well, hold on. What distro did you say you were using? Was it Ubuntu Mate?
Yep, Ubuntu Mate.
I have had this problem. In fact, there's a funny story that goes along with this. I have to tell it now that you asked. There's a video out there somewhere in the last archives if somebody wants to go find it. But basically, we were having this issue. For whatever reason, Ubuntu Mate has to have it has to be the very first hard drive, and it has to be called maybe SDA1 or SDA2 or something like that. And if you start getting too far outside of that, it starts to do really, really weird things. So we were sitting down, and Alan and I were trying to install Ubuntu Mate. And we go to install it, and first we were trying to install it to the M.2. Now, this has since been solved because I've installed Ubuntu Mate on M.2 drives. But at the time, we went to install it on the M.2, and we got this error about copy on write, and it said, something because of cow. And we were so...
I got that too.
Yeah, right. Okay, so it's like I've done this before. So we're sitting there, and we're so sleepy drunk because we've been up for 40 some hours, 50 some hours, and we had to get this up because we were broadcasting the very next day. And so we're sitting there, and as soon as that error came up, we just busted out laughing. What kind of idiotic error message is this? And Q5sys actually took a picture of the error message and tweeted it at Popey and said, "What is this error message and why is it talking about cows?" And Popey replied something along the lines of "Have you guys ever heard of Google or whatever?" And of course, it's we're too tired at that point to even think. It just struck us funny. So he goes, "Yeah," and then you can go find the tweet. It's actually pretty funny. He replied something about, "Yeah, we grepped the barn and looked for the horse and then got the cow to go talk to the milk." And he made this big farm analogy. It was funny to us anyway at 50 hours in of sleepy drunk. But the answer to your question is try a different distro. Try Ubuntu proper. You won't have that issue. Try Fedora. You won't have that issue. Or the proper thing to do would be to file a bug, and I'm sure the Ubuntu Mate folks will get right on fixing that if they know it. I was too lazy to file a bug, and I didn't have time at that point because we were busy, but that is almost certainly what is causing that problem. Does that help you?
Yes, it does, and maybe I'll have to go talk to Wimpy.
Yeah. Poke him, or the proper thing would probably be proper thing to do would be to probably file a bug. Would be, I think, what he'd probably prefer. But they'll probably get on that and fix it. But I have had that same issue. It just Ubuntu Mate there's some sort of bug in the installer, and it looks for a very specific drive. So that is what I would do. So I am biased when it comes to Linux. No, I'm not shocking anyone when I say that. There's nobody out there that's listening to me now that is like, "Oh, really? I thought Noah was a very pragmatic person, and he used all the No, nobody's saying that. Come on. But you know where I'm not biased? Phones. I'm not biased against any phone. I hate all of them. I hate phones. I hate smartphones. I have hated every smartphone I've ever laid my hands on since my Palm Trio. I find Android and Apple to be miserable excuses for a mobile operating system. I find Android to be slightly less miserable, slightly less offensive than Apple, and so I tend to use Android, but I hate both of them. And I will admit right up front that the part of the reason that makes that just nudges Android just a little bit over Apple for me is because Android, both platforms pull you to mobile, but Android just pulls you to mobile. Apple pulls you towards mobile and Mac. And that is true. If you look at any user that has an iPhone, they almost inevitably wind up on a Mac a couple years later. That's Apple's infrastructure. Their whole business model is based off of vendor lock-in. But I think both are a detriment to the Linux desktop, and I really don't find either to be a really compelling mobile experience. And more people I see in the field are now using mobile-only devices, and it's ridiculous. We installed a 27-inch Android tablet, and the stupid thing was so special that there was only one service provider we could find that would actually even sell a tablet that big, and you had to sign up for some idiotic TV service to even get the stupid thing that we had to do. And it was like, there was this guy, he tells me, he's like, "Well, it's more efficient to use these mobile operating systems, so I would really like a Android tablet for my desktop." This is some CEO, right? And I'm paid to serve, so I do what he tells me to do. But the reality is, it's the dumbest thing anyone's ever asked me to do. Put a phone instead of where a perfectly functional computer is. Come on. So anyway, the last couple weeks, I've started to look into different various phone options, and about halfway through the last week, I came to this realization. I was like, Android has always been ahead of Apple when it comes to releases. So we had NFC, we had, every feature, if you look at it, fingerprint readers, all this stuff came out first on Android devices. It's just implemented then and perfected by Apple. And then everyone says, oh, well, now it's actually released because Apple has blessed it or whatever, right? And what's frustrating about that to me is you hear a lot of people say, like fingerprint readers, for example, well, Android may have had the fingerprint reader, but Apple perfected it. Well, not really. Actually, as it turns out, the fingerprint reader on my S6 is, maybe not the S6, but the S7 and the S8 definitely as fast as the Apple fingerprint reader, and the Pixel faster. So they've both perfected fingerprint readers. It just took Android a little bit longer to actually integrate it into the OS than it did Apple, because Android, guess what, is selling to a number of manufacturers and Apple is doing everything themselves. So both of them perfected it and Android just got there first. So if you kind of just reframe it in your head and just say, okay, when a new Android device comes out, let it bake for 6 or 7 months, then go buy it and just pretend that it just came out, because that's what Apple's doing anyway, except they wait a couple years and then they release outdated stuff and say, well, here's the brand new one. Everyone go buy it. It's perfected. You've had these things for 5 years on competing manufacturers, but we've released it now. So this was interesting to me. And then to add on top of this, I had actually ordered a Pixel because it's been out for a couple months now and all of the issues have kind of been baked. And I had a suspicion. Every single time I have ever purchased a device from Google, not a Google partnered device like the Nexus devices, like an actual device from Google. And that would be my Chromebook Pixel and my Google Glass. The experience has been phenomenal. And I have people all the time that tell me about AppleCare. AppleCare is so great. AppleCare is fantastic. I had one guy was so impressed because he went into AppleCare and they replaced his AC adapter. They just gave him a new one. And he's like, oh my God, that's incredible. Yeah, Google gave me 4 new Google Pixel Chromebooks. I have the order history to prove them. They gave them to me because the other one, I broke the other one. And it wasn't that it was a poorly constructed computer. I just did stupid things with it. And Google was like, oh, we're sorry about that. I don't know how many $1,500 headset Google Glasses Google gave me. So there's actually one of the first episodes of User Error that we ever did. I went on record and I'm like, you know what? The Pixel is going to be a different phone. Oh no, it's not. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the same thing. And it wasn't just the people on User Error. Everyone I talked to, no, it's just a marketing thing. Google isn't going to do anything different. Well, I have a Pixel, and I'm here to tell you things are different. So, and that has led me down this entire track of trying every different phone possible. And right in the middle of this, Chris actually forwarded me a tweet from who was this? Stephen Hall, that confirmed that Google is dropping the headphone jack on the Pixel 2. Now here's the problem. I just bought a Pixel earlier that week, and I was thinking about how stupid it is that Apple drops the headphone jack to begin with. Because something you have to understand about Apple users. Apple users, they have rules. And you have rules to being an Apple user. And I can give you some insight into their mind, but rule number 1 is Apple users always have to make an excuse for everything. So here's a typical conversation with an Apple user. Not completely too far-fetched from one I had with somebody. So how do you like your iPhone 7? It sucks pretty bad that you don't have a headphone jack in a phone made in 2017. It's missing the most universal connector ever to exist in the human history. Yeah, not really, because they have dongles and AirPods. And that's rule 2. Always, if you you either have to not understand the technology, or even if you do understand the technology, you have to prove how Apple you are by using the Apple term and not the actual term. So it's not a Bluetooth phone. It's not wireless earphones. It's AirPod. It's not a fingerprint reader. It's Touch ID. It's not NFC. It's Apple Pay, which is actually fair because they've nerfed the software so you can only use the stupid radio to pay for things. You can't do anything else with it. I can unlock my doors. I can send files. I can do all sorts of things with my Android device. Can't do that on an iPhone. So they get rid of the headphone jack to make the phone waterproof. But as it turns out, and the more I think about this, the more upset I get about it, more people plug their phones into speakers and treadmills and chairs and sofas and cars and everything else under the sun. You know what I don't see a lot of people doing? Standing around swimming pools and throwing their phones inside of them. Splash. Splash. That was fun. So I started buckle down. I thought, let's go look at all of the phones available. And one of the things that I've always appreciated is that with Android, you have a number of different manufacturers to choose from. So I picked up a LG V20. I have my Samsung S6. I have my S8. I have my brand new Google Pixel. And yes, for comparison, I have borrowed a used iPhone 6. Full disclaimer, I didn't purchase the iPhone or the V20. They're on loan. My wife has the S8, so I just borrowed that for a little bit. The Pixel I purchased and the S6 I've had for 2.5 years or so. So first, let me say this. There are legitimately some things I come to like about the iPhone. At least for the moment, there is really no such thing as a junk iPhone. Even like the old, outdated models of the iPhone are still usable for most people. And I found that the screen, I started with the iPhone 5 or the iPhone 5S or whatever, and I was going to try that. And it wasn't really a fair comparison because the thing is so old, but it still technically works. And I find that screen to be completely unusable, but that is personal preference. There are some people that really like the 4-inch screen. But the nice thing about that is you don't really have to do any research or reviews. You can just buy something called an iPhone, and if it's made in the last 3 or 4 years, it's probably usable. And that's not true when it comes to Android. There's plenty of junk Android phones. The other thing I liked about it is that the iPhone is made by the same company as the company that makes the software. And so for the most part, everything is in the same place across models. Headphone jacks in the, roughly the same place. It went from the top to the bottom, but volume is in the same place. They have the physical mute button, power button. Obviously the operating system is very tightly integrated. It's a very responsive, intuitive system. If you've never used a smartphone before and you sit down at an Android and an Apple device, you're probably going to pick up the Apple device much more quickly, unless you're using like the, I forget what it's called, but like the GIMP mode for elderly seasoned people on Android. It's like it dumbs down the interface. But in general, things are just integrated at a deeper level. You're making a phone call on the iPhone, you just click on the FaceTime thing, all of a sudden now I'm video chatting. You text a person, if they have an Apple device, it automatically transcribes it to an iMessage as data. If they don't, it sends it as an SMS. This is even transparent. People don't even know they're doing it. I mean, it's a very clean integrated device. The fingerprint sensor, definitely quicker than my S6. Definitely not any faster than the Pixel. In fact, I think the Pixel's faster. And I couldn't tell you for sure between the S8 and the iPhone. It's kind of a toss-up. It just kind of depends on how consistently you put your finger on either of the phones. It's a toss-up. But I wanted to dispel a couple of myths about the iPhone because there's some common things that are going around that are just not true. So one, people will tell you, well, iPhones, they don't come with any pre-installed junk. That is 100% false. The only difference is the junk is installed by Apple themselves and not the carriers. Apple preloads a bunch of garbage that I had no interest in, and Samsung load a bunch of garbage that I had no interest in. The only difference between my S6 and my iPhone, because both of them were bought from the factory unlocked, so that's not like, the carrier did anything to either of them. But Apple users will tell you how amazing that voice memos and tips and podcasts and iBooks and reminders and stocks and all the other junk that I actually would prefer the third-party apps for and have no use for. And then to add insult to injury, and not that it's any different than Android, you can't actually remove it easily anyway. There's like some hacks, but for the most part, you just stack everything up in an unused folder. Oh, by the way, you can't remove icons off your home screen easily like you can in Android. So I just have a folder called junk. That's cute. But the other myth I keep hearing about is that they have fixed the home screen for customization. You can organize, and they have folders, but you can't decide where the icons go. Like they all have to stack up towards the top. And I have kind of an organization system. I have like all my utilities in one part of the screen, all the social stuff in another part of the screen, all my work stuff. You can't do that on iOS. So it lacks fundamental basic use things that have been available for Android since the get-go. iPhone still doesn't have them. And then you have all the headaches that people acknowledge, right? So first of all, the charger. Every electronic in my house now has a USB-C charger. My laptop, my Pixel, but not the iPhone. And even if I was an excuse-making Apple lover hippie with a MacBook, the charger that my laptop is plugged into while I'm sitting on the house still can't be plugged into my phone. And so to me, that's just a huge mistake on Apple's part. And what has frustrated me is Apple continues to release the same product over and over and over again with minimal improvements, and people line up to pay the next $800. And it's frustrating. And the only real compelling argument that I hear from other people is, well, Apple updates. They have updates. They have updates. And users, they don't know how to install these alternative operating systems. So updates. First of all, the people that I'm running into couldn't care less. They couldn't give a flying rip about updates. In fact, I would venture to say the average user doesn't even know what version of the software they're running is. You know what users do notice? That they have the same charging cord for their laptop and they can charge their phone. You know what users do notice? They can't plug their phone into their speaker system anymore because there's no headphone jack. You know what users do notice? They ran out of storage space, and instead of, they have to buy a new $800 phone rather than a $35 SD card. You know what users do notice? They can't take out their battery and put a new one in when they're traveling. You know what users do notice? They don't have a choice of manufacturer. If one manufacturer does something bad, they can't just go to the other manufacturer. Users notice that stuff. And the techies, if they want to, they can choose different ROMs. So one of the things that I've been playing with now is something called Lineage OS. And what Lineage OS is it basically the continuation of CyanogenMod. And it's fantastic. But where the rubber really meets the road is with the Yelp store, YALP. And basically, what the Yelp store does is it is an app that you install on the phone, and it acts kind of like a store. And you can go find the applications that you want. So let's say you want Telegram. You go find Telegram, you click on it, and it will go download the APK, store it locally, and then install it on the device. Now, I like that for a number of reasons. One, I have a copy of all the APKs that I've ever installed. So before I reflash my phone, I can just plug it into my laptop, copy all the APKs off, and now I have them kind of like back in the old Palm days where you downloaded the installer and you had all your Palm OS files, so you could just reinstall them. So that's cool. Second of all, I like the fact that it is App Store-ish, so I don't have to use a laptop and plug in a cable and APK or whatever, APD flash or whatever the command is to like flash these APKs onto there manually. I like that. But mostly what really appeals to me is the battery life is incredible. Your battery life goes from like a day. I got, even though my S6 is year and a half, 2 years, I probably got, I would say, a day and a half. And I'm a fairly heavy mobile user. With Lineage and Yelp, you get like 3 days of battery life. And I tried it on the Nexus 5. Our producer, Just Ben, is running it on his Nexus 4. Amazing performance, incredible battery life, immediate updates. So it's like you are really getting the best of every possible world. And the only downside to this is you got to do it yourself. You got to install it yourself. And there's guides for everything. And if you have a Nexus device, it's like super easy. I mean, it's literally, you issue 3 commands. You plug it in, issue a command, unlock the bootloader, you flash the new ROM to it, and you restart the phone. I mean, it takes 15 minutes. It's an incredible experience. And once you start stripping Google Play services off of the phone, I find the phone to actually be more useful, and I actually trust the underlying OS more, because I don't trust it on Apple either. I don't trust anyone with just some company, particularly Apple, who has a key to update my device. So if they wanted to, in this FBI investigation, it's not that they didn't do it. It's the fact that the FBI discovered and understands that it is technically possible for Apple to force an update down to a given iPhone or all the iPhones that require it to unlock to accept an override pin or something like that. I mean, that's a thing that you could do. Good luck doing that with an operating system that I flashed onto the device. And I feel like I have administrative access over the device. So it's interesting because as I'm comparing all of this stuff as it relates to Google, right? At the same time that I'm trying to get away from Google Play services, their device is just unbelievably great. I didn't think I could get into the fingerprint reader on the back. That has been flawless. I have dropped this thing, I don't know how many times in the week I've had it, not a scratch on it. It's built extremely well. And what's interesting is I've started asking people when they tell me, they're like, yeah, this is going to be different than your past Google purchases. The Pixel, it's just a marketing thing. They haven't done anything different. It's all going to be the same thing. I've started asking people, how many products do you own from Google? Do you own a Pixel? No. Do you own a Google Glass? No. Did you own a Pixel laptop? No. Okay. So you don't have any of the experience purchasing products from Google, and I do, and every single one of them has been phenomenal. And so far, I mean, they gave me free shipping. Free overnight shipping that I didn't even ask. Like the phone just showed up the next day, and the customer service at Google is just next level. And part of that is just because they are such a huge company and they do so little of it. You can't really reach a human when it comes to YouTube. You can't really reach a human when it comes to, if you have a search problem or whatever, right? So all of their workforce their customer service base is really supporting at the moment a single product, which is the Google Pixel, or maybe the Pixel and then whatever their tablet thing is. But the phone has been incredible. And again, having compared this to the LG V20, compared this to the S6, comparing this to my wife's S8, I'm not super excited about them dropping the headphone jack, but I am very, very excited for the phone as a whole. It's really been, an incredible experience. And then again, diving into some of the alternative operating systems that are available for Android, really just kind of open the gate up, because at the end of the day, this weighs on me, and maybe I give this more weight than it should. And again, I'll disclose my bias up front, and you guys can take it with a grain of salt. Apple brags that if you buy an iPhone and you pair it or tether it or connect it or iCloudify, whatever you call it, up to your MacBook, then when you want to get on the internet and you don't have Wi-Fi and you click on the little icon, it'll activate your hotspot or, Apple Cloudify your internet connection to your phone so that you can get on the internet, right? That's the selling point. It's kind of cool. I'm not going to lie. Thought there was a way I could set that up on my phone, probably do it. Do you know what Android is advertising? You know what KDE is advertising? KDE Connect. That's what they brag about. They brag about integrating your Android device into your KDE desktop. And I guess at the end of the day, as I kind of look at some of these things, I look at it and I say, okay, most of the iPhone users, if not all of them, not most, I know a couple, most iPhone users eventually wind up in the Apple infrastructure because there's just that much less resistance, right? I already have the iPhone. If I just had this, then I could do this. If I just bought that Apple product, I could do that. And slowly but surely, they just kind of start dragging people over. And I find that to be kind of frustrating. And it seems like the Android folks are continually working with the open source community. And it seems like when an open source project comes out, they release a version for Android rather than Apple. So I'll give you an example. OS Ticket. OS Ticket was available on Android a year and a half before it was ever available on iOS. In fact, even right now, the iOS version is nowhere near as complete as the Android version. And part of that is just because a lot of people in the IT industry, a lot of the people in the IT industry that value open source, those people are on Android or variants of Android. And there's people in the chat room that are talking about the OnePlus. I agree. I think that I think that the OnePlus folks are doing really good. I kind of got turned off by the OnePlus when they started getting in bed with Microsoft, because at the end of the day, I try to never hit Microsoft without also taking a stab at Apple, and I try to never take a stab at Apple without taking a stab at Microsoft. They are two different companies. They do two different offensive things, but at the end of the day, I find them to both be pretty atrocious software companies. Now I'm going to bring Mike back on because he's still hanging on the phone, so I'm assuming that he's still there, and I'm assuming that you listened to the rest of my rant on Android. Did that more fully answer your question?
Absolutely. And yeah, battery problem has actually been a major problem for me, because even right now, I have to have my phone plugged up and the phone itself is hot. And
if you look, what you'll find is that 90% of the things, if you use one of those battery optimizer things, 90% of the stuff that is running is Google Play services and doesn't need to be running for the phone to work, because at the end of the day, most of the time I'm using my phone, I'm either checking email, doesn't require anything from Google, I am sending a telegram, doesn't require anything from Google, or making a phone call, requires very little, if anything, from Google. And the fact that my battery life gets eaten up by the stupid Google Play services is really frustrating.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that there are so many background processes for apps that I haven't even opened within my session, I'll turn on my phone and all of a sudden apps are running in the background that I haven't even opened up since I turned my phone on. And most of those are searching for your location and things like that, stuff I don't want it to know. Mm-hmm. Not that I have anything to hide, but it's unnecessary for a software company to know where I am at all times.
Yeah, I agree. I'll tell you the most offensive thing to me, and again, I really thank you for not only calling in, but hanging on the phone so long. That's really amazing. Thank you. One of the things I have noticed is that I notice applications that are running when they crash, and that's like a double whammy, because now it's like you didn't need to be running to begin with, and your software was so crappily written that it crashed. So it's pretty frustrating. But anyway, all in all, that to say, I can now say that I have used iOS for 4 or 5 days. I'm never going back. I'm returning the thing to its owner, and I'll be glad to wash my hands of it. I have used the LG V20 was a great phone. I think the Pixel feels better made. The S8 definitely feels better made. And overall, if I had my choice, I'd still take a button on the bottom with the fingerprint sensor over the thing on the back. That's kind of my takeaway. But very, very good phones all around, and hope you guys found this an interesting review. That brings us to the end of this program. Huge thanks to Ben, our producer, Sarah, our call screener, and Rakai, our video editor. We'll hand you off to Crosspoint coming up next on Logos Radio, KEQQ 88.3 LPFM, Grand Forks.